I'm in my early 40s now, and I've started to realize that the older I get, the less certain I am about where this story actually began. Not because I've forgotten what happened. I remember it too well. But because back then, everything blurred together into one long stretch of motion. No clear beginnings. No clean endings. Just days stacked on top of each other. All driven by the same quiet panic. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't let anything fall apart. It was the early 2000s, in a college town in Harvard. From the outside, it looked almost unreal. Red brick buildings glowing in the fall. Old libraries that smelled like coffee, paper, dust. Tree-lined paths where students walked fast, talked confidently, laughed loudly, as if they already knew exactly who they were going to become. Everyone there seemed to be in rehearsal for a future that promised importance. What you don't see at first is the anxiety, the constant hum under everything, the understanding that mistakes aren't just mistakes there. They're stains, permanent ones. I came from a small provincial town where life moved slowly and everyone knew each other's business. For my parents, my acceptance into Harvard wasn't just an achievement. It was proof. Proof that they had raised me right. Proof that sacrifice works. Proof that if you do everything correctly, the world will reward you. I was that girl, the one who made it out. The one people talked about in hushed, proud voices. And I carried that weight with me every single day, even when no one said a word. The summer before my first year, I went back home. Everything there felt smaller, quieter, familiar in a way that almost felt dangerous. Same streets, same faces, same people who remembered me before I became someone important. That's where that summer happened. No romance, no dramatic speeches. Just an older guy, nothing serious. A few evenings that felt grown up and reckless in the way only 16-year-olds misunderstand. Music playing from someone's car. Alcohol passed around like it meant nothing. Warm air sticking to your skin. That naive belief that if something happens during summer, it doesn't really count. I didn't think about consequences. At 16, you genuinely believe serious things only happen to other people. This wasn't love. It was an episode. Something that was supposed to end when the leaves started falling and real life resumed. I went back to Harvard convinced I had left it all behind. When I realized I was pregnant, it didn't arrive as one clear, dramatic moment. It came in waves. First denial, then the quiet hope that my body was just off, that stress was doing strange things. And then that moment alone, standing still, when the truth settled in and refused to move. I returned to campus carrying that secret inside me like a second heartbeat. I sat in lectures surrounded by brilliant minds, listened to people debate philosophy and economics, and thought about how none of them could see what I was holding together behind my ribs. To them, I was still the same girl, focused, capable, on track. But I already knew I didn't belong there in the same way anymore. I had a boyfriend. He was safe, reliable, calm, the kind of man everyone calls a good choice. My parents liked him. Professors respected him. Standing next to him, I looked correct. He fit the story people had written for me long before I ever agreed to it. We slept together, and after that I told him I was pregnant with his child. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count, trying to understand whether it was a calculated lie or pure instinct. At the time, it didn't feel like a moral crossroads. It felt like survival. I could see only one future where my life didn't collapse instantly. He believed me. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand details, didn't hesitate. He said he was ready to take responsibility. And just like that, the decision was made. We got married quickly. No big celebration, but all the right words were said. All the right explanations were given. People looked at us with admiration. They said we were mature, brave, responsible, that we were doing the right thing. I learned to repeat those words long before I actually believed them. Our child was born into love. That part is true, and I won't pretend otherwise. My husband was, and still is, a good father. He never doubted anything, never questioned the story. We built a life together that looked solid from every angle. Home, work, routines, the ordinary struggles every family has. From the outside, it was a success story. But inside me, the tension never fully disappeared. Every doctor's appointment made my stomach tighten. Every test result, every offhand medical comment felt like standing on thin ice. I lived with the constant awareness that my entire life was balanced on silence. Years passed, and nothing happened. No exposure, no accidental truth, no unraveling. The secret stayed exactly where it was, only with me. And that, over time, became heavier than I ever imagined, because I had no one to share it with, no way to test whether I'd done the right thing, no moment of release. I just kept living, carrying a version of myself no one else knew existed. And slowly, I started to understand something terrifying. This secret wasn't destroying my marriage, it was destroying my sense of who I was. I was playing my role perfectly. Good wife, good mother, successful woman. But inside there was a fracture that never healed. A quiet awareness that part of my life was a performance, no matter how sincere my love had become. Sometimes I wonder who I would have been if I'd told the truth back then. Not in some heroic movie-like way. Just, honestly, would I have survived it? Would I have been braver? Or just broken differently? I don't know. And maybe that's the hardest part. As the years went by, the secret didn't feel like a ticking bomb anymore. It became something quieter, heavier, less dramatic, but more permanent. It stopped feeling like something that might explode one day and started feeling like something that had settled into the walls of my life. The way old buildings absorb smoke or dampness and never fully let it go. Harvard faded into memory. Careers replaced classrooms. We moved into a comfortable rhythm that looked almost textbook perfect. Morning routines, work schedules, school events, dinner conversations about practical things. From the outside, there was nothing to question. And that's what made it so isolating. There was no crisis to react to. No visible wound anyone could point at and say, "This is where it hurts." I learned something important during those years. Silence doesn't feel like silence when you're the only one keeping it. It feels like constant vigilance, like always standing a step behind yourself, monitoring every word, every reaction, every casual conversation that could drift too close to something real. I became very good at controlling myself, not in the impressive, disciplined way people admire, in the quiet way that erases edges. I learned how to redirect conversations, how to smile at the right moments, how to avoid thinking too deeply when certain questions came up in my own head. Over time, that habit spread to other parts of my life. I stopped asking myself questions that didn't have practical answers. I stopped wondering who I was becoming because the answer always led somewhere uncomfortable. The strange thing is, I wasn't unhappy. That's what makes this story difficult to explain. I wasn't miserable. I loved my child deeply. I respected my husband. I appreciated the life we had built. But underneath all of that lived a constant, low-level tension. Like background noise you only notice when it suddenly stops. Sometimes late at night, I would sit alone in the kitchen with the lights off, listening to the refrigerator hum, and feel this sudden wave of grief that didn't attach itself to anything specific. Not regret exactly. Not guilt in the way people expect. More like mourning for a version of myself that never got to exist openly. I realized that lies don't just hide facts. They shape identities. The lie I told at 16 didn't just protect me from consequences, it quietly defined who I was allowed to be afterward. Every choice I made was filtered through the need to maintain coherence. I couldn't be reckless. I couldn't be impulsive. I couldn't afford emotional honesty that might lead somewhere unpredictable. I'd already used up my one deviation from the script. There were moments when the truth almost surfaced. A doctor asking a question in a slightly different way. A comment about genetics. A casual joke someone made that landed too close. Each time my body reacted before my mind did. Tight chest, cold hands, a rehearsed calm, and then life moved on. What surprised me most was that the fear didn't fade with time. It evolved. It became less about being exposed and more about being unseen. About living an entire life where a core truth never had language. Where the most formative decision I ever made existed only as a private burden. People talk a lot about guilt when they talk about secrets like this. But guilt implies wrongdoing with a clear victim. This was messier. This was about responsibility tangled with protection, fear tangled with love. I didn't lie to hurt anyone. I lied to survive. And then I kept lying to keep surviving the life that grew out of that first decision. Sometimes I imagine sitting across from my younger self. 16, certain she's being clever, certain she's choosing the option that hurts the least. I don't judge her anymore. I understand her too well. She wasn't trying to manipulate anyone. She was trying to preserve a future that everyone else had already invested in. And yet, understanding doesn't erase cost. The cost was subtle. It showed up in moments of distance I couldn't explain, in a sense that I was always slightly out of alignment with my own life, that no matter how stable things became, there was a version of me standing just outside it, watching. I don't know if the truth would have destroyed everything. I don't know if honesty would have led to a better life or simply a different one. What I do know is that silence shaped me more than the truth ever could have. It trained me to prioritize structure over authenticity, safety over clarity, order over self-knowledge. Now, in my 40s, I don't feel the urge to confess in some dramatic way. This isn't about absolution. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm not even looking for understanding. I'm simply naming something that has existed my entire adult life without language. I did what I believed was right. I still believe that. But I've learned that doing the right thing doesn't guarantee freedom. Sometimes it builds a life that functions perfectly while quietly separating you from yourself. When people talk about consequences, they imagine explosions, ruined reputations, broken families. What they don't talk about is the slow erosion. The way one decision can gently narrow your emotional range without you noticing. How easy it is to mistake stability for wholeness. On very quiet evenings when the house is still and there's no one watching me be anything in particular, I let myself feel it. Not regret, not shame, just awareness of what was protected and what was lost. I'm telling this story now not to undo the past and not to rewrite it. That's impossible. I'm telling it because silence doesn't disappear on its own. It just waits. And sometimes saying the truth out loud, even without witnesses, is the only way to reclaim a piece of yourself that's been missing for decades. I still believe I did the right thing. I just finally understand what it cost.